Howdy homesteaders, on to another project while Tara's away on her business trip. Behind me up there you can see that the eaves are hanging over and they're completely open. It goes right up into the shack. Down on the other end you may or may not be able to see the insulation that's up there. But when we were originally looking at this being a one-year structure, just long enough to get us through the winter, and then we'd be building this summer and hopefully be in our carriage home by fall. You may have recalled in a previous video that this is going to be at least a 2-year structure now, and we're going to be slowing down the build so we can do more of it ourselves and that whole story. But anyways, you can go back and try to track down that. But back to the eaves, I want to fill that soffit space up there. If we stood here long enough, you'd be able to see some sparrows heading down and heading up in there, and I'm hoping they have hatched. I know they were pretty active up in there, and I didn't want to disrupt their nest and that kind of a thing. But at the very least, I am going to start doing the edging and prep the boards to cover that soffit space on both sides. I've got some trim stuff that we got that's left over from that shop demolish, and so I'm going to get moving on with that. But the first things first, I need to go up in there and make sure two things. Number one, the bees like to get up into all these little spots. I've been taking them down in the awning, and I'm hoping that they haven't gone to town up in the attic space up in the shack above the plastic. So that's actually going to be my thing right now, is I'm going to head up in there, cut a little access hatch, and climb up in there and see if there's any bees and or swallow nests. So wish me luck. Fortunately, there's nothing immediately above me. That was my fear, is cutting through that thing and poking my head up here and suddenly having a swarm of bees hitting my head. Nothing immediately obvious from a bee perspective, and that's good. But unfortunately, I have to go down all the way down there to go check that far corner for swallows' nests. So hopefully I don't fall through and land on our trailer. Just in case. So surprisingly, there is not a single bee's nest up here. I was fully expecting to have to eradicate something, but I'm glad I didn't. One thing I did find, however, is little mama swallow right there. I keep seeing her poke down underneath her, so I think she's got some babies underneath there. I guess what insulation dust. I guess what I'll do is I'll cover those soffit spaces up until that point, and then I'll give her a couple weeks to hatch her brood out. But anyways, time to get out from this dust mess. So the next step in doing this, I've got some of the trim pieces cut to length. I'm starting to do the actual horizontal soffit covers, but I need to take several things into consideration. Number one, I got the the two end pieces, the span between the trusses is actually different than the majority of them. It's 2 feet between all of them except for those end ones, and that's actually more along the lines of 29 inches. It just happened to be how the math worked out. And then I also need to calculate in the it'd be a lot easier to put in the vents down here than up on the, when they're already up. And so you can see the one up in the V up there at the top. And I took the time, looked up code, and calculated what the ventilation needs were. And basically you calculate the square footage of the attic space, and then you divide it by a particular number, and it gives you the cubic feet per minute that your ventilation should be able to handle. So I've got one of those vents on either end, which is from the vertical, from the top point of it, that's more than enough. And then I got some individual little vents for putting horizontally up underneath those eaves there. I got 4 per side. That should be giving me plenty of ventilation. Actually, it's probably going to be more ventilation by probably about 30% based on what those things are listed as. And so that keeps the sweating and everything from happening up underneath the roof and dripping and all that kind of stuff. And that's especially important with this metal roofing. So anyways, I created a little jig, and I'm going to calculate and start putting those vents in as I'm putting up the soffit, the plywood. So anyways, moving on. Well, the first one went up. Had a couple little difficulties trying to balance things up there until I pulled out my clamp, but it's easier with Tara here, but she's gone on a business trip. So anyways, that's up. I'm fairly happy with how it looks and how it fits and everything for how we're piecemealing this together with all that demo materials and all that kind of stuff. I think it's actually not looking bad, and it's actually coming together fairly nicely. Obviously, I have a fair amount more to do, and then I've got to put up the fascia board on the front that I was cutting up earlier, and then I've got the other side. So anyways, I'm going to try to get some stuff done. I've got to go into town here in about 2 hours, so I'll see what I can get done in the meantime. Well, I have got most of that soffit stuff done, with the exception of that piece way down there, and that was actually where that mama bird was that I got a picture of while I was up in the attic space. She's sitting on some babies, so I'm going to just leave that one off. You can see I haven't put the fascia piece on the front of it yet. Those are pre-cut and ready to go. I just need some help putting them up. They're 16 feet long. I don't feel like trying to wrestle them. That's a good thing for me to enlist Tara in when she gets back from her trip. So the conclusion of this video will probably be that And then this side over here is completely done with the exception of the fascia board. So anyways, standing by until my lovely bride gets home from her trip. So it has been probably 2 weeks since I started that project of working on the soffit space. And you may remember from a little earlier in the video, there was a little bird's nest up in there. And so I took the time, well, I didn't take the time, I did the soffit space all the way up until that point, and then waited so Mama Bird could do her thing. So I went through a couple different phases. And then just earlier this week, I popped my head up in there, and the nest was empty. So babies are gone, Mama's gone, pulled the nest out, discouraged anything else from getting up in there. And then Tara and I this morning got out and finished putting the rest of the soffit, the base stuff underneath the trusses, and then went so far as to put the fascia, the faceboard along this side. The brother-in-law, he came up a couple weeks ago and he helped me put up the other side, so it's done also. But so now we've got soffit space up underneath there with the venting and the faceboard on there. So Tara's already noticed a decrease in the amount of insects that are showing up in the house, so that's a plus. We'll have some ventilation. There was actually an owl up in there last week and it disappeared, so although it would have been cool to have a pet owl, but whatever. So anyways, one project down. The one thing we did on there extra was I had some little strips, and you can see up in there, up underneath where the vertical meets the horizontal, there was the occasional little gap and stuff, and I had enough stripping there to be able to do that strip all the way down on both sides. So gives it a little bit more of a finished texture, and that's on to another set of projects. Homesteader out.